Hi, I'm Sonal from India, and my pronouns are she and they. I lead as a co-founder at Boondh. We work on all things menstrual health, programming, interventions, advocacy, training, and reusable period products. At 14, even though I had very painful periods, I would not miss a day at school. I would rather pop a pill in the morning, a painkiller, show up at school, sit through the first hour, and then ask permission from a teacher and then go behind their class and then lay down for the rest of the day. And this was the norm every single month whenever I got my period. More than my teachers and my classmates, it was the janitors who knew how much pain I was in and how frequently I would have to change a pad because they would see me outside the toilet very often. And this was respite because at home there was discrimination. My family practiced untouchability for the first 3 days of the period, wherein a menstruator was allowed to touch only those things that were absolutely required, say their clothes, dishes, or temporary bedding, etc. And even after once we had touched it and used it, we had to wash and rinse it before other people could touch it. In such a situation, when I spoke about my pain, it fell on deaf ears because nobody was able to relate to my pain. And at 14, I was wondering, what was it that was different? Was my body different? Was my pain different? Why is it that nobody was able to relate to me? What was stopping them from believing me? And about a decade and a half, now we realize that women's pain across the world is often dismissed. So what was happening? Medically, it's this condition called dysmenorrhea, which causes menstrual cramps and pelvic pain due to a number of reasons. Could be fibroids, could be endometriosis, passing blood clots, so many reasons. And culturally, there is just this dismissal of women's pain. And socially, there's an added burden of having these expectations when someone is already in pain. So here I am undergoing extreme menstrual pain, and I also have to meet these expectations of doing my dishes, washing my clothes. And this led me to a realization that everyone's experience is unique and we don't know all experiences that exist. So it's important for us to listen and share, because if we're not going to share our stories, maybe nobody else will know and the onus is on us. So this happened. And then it continued, pain continued. And I think at age 16, this one time it was unbearable. And I walked out of the toilet with a blood clot, with a golf ball sized blood clot, and asked if it was normal. It wasn't, and I was ushered to a gynecologist. A few tests were done, an ultrasound was taken, and the diagnosis was that I have PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, it is told that it is caused by hormonal imbalance, but it could be caused by so many other things, and research is still going on. I was put on birth control pill at the age of 16 and asked to lose weight. I was also told that it will be difficult to lose weight because I have PCOS. And the only way to treat PCOS, at least the most commonly known way, is to lose weight. So here's a cycle, the chicken and the egg. So I did what I was asked to. I took the pills religiously, and I exercised. I tried a bunch of things. Initially, I did high intensity workouts. Then I figured that the stress hormone is not helping. So then I did a low intensity workout, and there was diet changes. There was so many changes in life in general. And this was also a time when internet was a commonplace thing. So I started looking up what was it, because the pills that were prescribed to me, they were making me feel sluggish, lazy, causing nausea and a lot of bloating. And every time I went to the doctor saying these things, I was just told that these are common and I need to start getting used to them because this is a part of the treatment. And on the internet, I was reading different things. I was reading words like insulin resistance, inflammation caused by gluten, and excessive androgen, and also pill-induced PCOS. And now here I am surprised that the treatment that is prescribed to me for, like pills that are prescribed for treatment of PCOS, are the same pills that are exacerbating or causing PCOS. So how was all this happening? It was very confusing. Medically, there is no particular reason this happens. We know it's hormone therapy, but we're not able to pinpoint that this is the reason PCOS happens and we can fix it. And that's where we're at. And there's ongoing research and there's some existing research. And culturally, at least in India, healthcare is not very solid in the sense that a healthcare receiver, a patient, is not told the pros and cons of medicines, the risk associated with birth control pills, especially given to someone as young as 15 or 16 years old, it's not responsible, and also the patient is not able to make choices for themselves. There's very little agency in it. And neither are parents or caregivers informed about it. And socially, it's almost impossible to have a conversation about PCOS in public or with friends or in a circle of close family, because PCOS is closely related with infertility. And if I, as a person with uterus, and as for most women, if I cannot perform as a tool to patriarchy in advancing a man's bloodline, I would be deemed inefficient in some circles. So that's tough to talk about PCOS socially, and we're also talking about this like a decade ago, right? And then if we have to look at what realization this brings to front, is that we cannot just rely on one source that we have, and especially the source from our immediate vicinity or our immediate reality. We have to look beyond, and we also have to constantly reassess what we know and how we know it, and work out various solutions and kind of find a fit that works for us. So this happened at 16, and then a few years continued. I went to university. I was 19, and the pills continued to make me sluggish, lazy. There was bloating, but there are also new symptoms that came up. And these symptoms were worrying. They're extreme. These are some things I live with even today. At university, I stayed in a women's dorm, a girls' hostel, and I knew what PMS was, and I knew what premenstrual syndrome looked like. But what I was experiencing was a little more than that. I would wake up with sweats, and this has only gotten worse with age. It continues even today until last month in November. And there's mood swings of the kind that in an hour I could sometimes experience 4 or 5 things. So sometimes it could be rage, sometimes I would laugh a lot, sometimes it would be a maddening urge to pull my hair and laugh, and sometimes it would be depression, sometimes it would be incessant crying, which is unexplainable. I had no reason to cry. And there was heightened sensitivity to emotions. Now, to be talking about it in 2010 was a different experience, because some of us didn't have the language. Such words like depression or anxiety don't exist, or isn't as simple in our native language, in our mother tongues. So how do I share with my mother or my healthcare provider that I'm experiencing these symptoms? It was tough, but luckily a couple of years later, there was a boom about mental health awareness, and there were articles and these campaigns that were talking about depression. And I realized that what I was going through, the symptoms that I was experiencing, were those that came close to depression, and also look something like bipolar disorder. Now, that's the thing about PMDD, it mimics both of these mental health conditions. But I did check with a psychiatrist, and but this is the only way to put it, I haven't ever felt that understood in life. To be validated, to have all my experiences validated, to not be thought of and tagged as hysterical. And I was very scared of doing that, because if I was, before PMDD actually was diagnosed as a disorder, if I were to be talking about something like this, what if I was adding to a bias towards, a negative bias towards women in positions of responsibility and leadership? I didn't want to do that. So how do I talk to people about these extreme emotions I'm facing, and they are cyclic in nature, and I know I am facing them. So when I did talk to a psychiatrist, and she said that yes, this is valid and this exists, I felt understood. And it also made me realize that science has its limitations. Medical research takes time, and it is also not devoid of gender bias. It is important, especially in such a situation, it is imperative that we trust in our lived experiences, and even if science can only explain it years after, right? So a lot of things were happening in my head, and I was trying to understand why was it that these things were happening, and why was it that this was happening just before my period and would vanish completely after that. And when we keep asking why, basically again the same way of looking at it. Medically, this was a condition that was not diagnosed, that was not recognized by mental health fraternity up until 2013 and 14. And so we didn't know what this was. So every time I went to a gynecologist, they wouldn't know. They would just say I have extreme PMS, or that I am sensitive and I should learn to cope with my emotions. But how to explain mood swings to someone who is not familiar with the concept of it? And culturally, it's menstrual health and mental health. Both of these are super stigmatic areas. So it's toba toba. At least in India, you can't talk about both of these together in one place. Or at least we couldn't, and I'm glad that now we are. Um, and socially, I think, and this is the most frightening part, there's constant fear and anxiety about how we're going to be dealing with it. What if everyone finds out that we're incapable of doing it? PMDD is a mental health condition around one's menstrual cycle, which can disrupt work and also damage relationships because it's heightened emotional sensitivity. And I was constantly afraid, what if my friends abandoned me, or what if my family or workplace figured out that I was not good enough? And to live with this constant low self-worth is extremely traumatic. And I think socially that was the biggest feeling I had then. And the realization that all of this brought to me was that my experiences are valid, even if there is lack of established research. And I have the right to seek treatment, even if there's an undiagnosed condition. Given that these happened to me since early teenage to now, which is close to 30s, I can't but help review menstruation and also life at large. I've learned three things. First is that there are multiple realities formed by unique experiences of our own and those around us, and it is only by listening, sharing, and not dismissing what we don't understand yet can we truly make it inclusive. And the second is to constantly reassess and recheck what we know, be it existing research, ongoing research, solutions from far and wide. How can we contextualize it, adapt it? In my case, it's usually a combination of many things, but it is important to keep questioning and reassessing what already is known and existing. And the third thing is to honor one's lived experience over lack of expertise. Imagine going to tens of doctors and telling them about PMS driving you suicidal, and meeting with gaslighting because there is lack of established research. And applying this lens to reassess all things we know around menstruation, policies, products, behavior is important. You may think, oh, everything she's talking about sounds so vague. So let's take an example. Growing up, what did we discuss when we spoke about period? Mostly sanitary napkins. Sanitary napkins that we use today are 90% plastic, are not good for the body because they have harmful chemicals in them and cause rashes, and take about 600 to 800 years on an average to start decomposing. So when there are so many negative effects, why don't we consider reusable products like menstrual cups and cloth pads, at least for those of us who are able-bodied and can consider them? Again, the same two things, because one, there is lack of reassessing options, lack of reassessing the conventional narrative, and lack of reassessing what we're told, that this is the only product that exists and this is what's going to work out for us. And there's also a lack of believing that there are multiple possibilities, right? Not multiple realities perhaps this time, but multiple possibilities and alternatives available which could also work for us. This also brings to light how little we know about menstruation and how limited our education around menstruation is. Every time we talk about menstruation, it's just about period and products. Whereas we need to be talking about the entire menstrual cycle, the hormonal complexity of it, the interrelatedness with other bodily functions, the support that we seek, and the ease of access to this support that we seek. There's so much more to it. Hence, my invitation to everybody listening to this would be to unlearn menstruation as we know it and start reassessing it. And the minute our understanding expands, we're going to identify so many gaps that we can bridge for all of us here. From the top of my mind, I can think of a few things. Let's say every time we talk about period leave, which is so topical right now, we're only talking about period pain and period, and not the entire menstrual cycle, which means we leave out people with conditions such as endometriosis or PMDD who might need a leave on a day other than their period. So it is important and imperative rather that we integrate and account for menstrual experiences across the spectrum that exists. And say, to give you another example, we need to fund more research which is on treatment of these conditions, and also have more data on the prevalence of such disorders, and think about how we can give affordable healthcare and have it accessible to people across all socio-economic strata. And it is important to sensitize educators and healthcare givers about menstrual cycle at large and not just periods, so that there is no menstrual shaming and no menstruator ever again has to feel compromised. To conclude, I urge you to question fiercely and question frequently and question with compassion, to find your power in your lived experience, and to bridge the gaps that you encounter and make this world a little less difficult for all of us to navigate. Thank you for listening.